Good evening, everyone. Can I have your attention, please, so we can get the evening started? It's not easy, as beautiful as the venue is, it's not always so easy to get everyone's attention for just a little bit. We have an unbelievable evening planned for you tonight that Vishan Mark Wigley have put together. This is inaugural Cure benefit dinner, and for those of you that know what it is, great, and if you don't, you certainly will by the end of this evening. It is enormously exciting what we have to present to you this evening, and it really is just, it awes me to see this room filled with these industry leaders just 2.5 years into the transformation that was first envisioned by Mark, and then, the gauntlet taken up by Vishan. And here it is, 225 people or so, sold out venue. So congratulations, guys. You really delivered on your promise. I can't think of a more appropriate venue than Low Library to host this discussion of the ways in which the Center for Urban Real Estate is going to lead the dialogue on the important and highly relevant real estate matters affecting New York City and major developing cities throughout the world. Tonight, we come together as an industry to begin helping Columbia to identify those challenges being faced by our city, challenges that we can help address in a meaningful way by collectively bringing our resources and best thinking to this task, by ultimately helping to bring about solutions to these challenges and advocating for what's best for our city, something that I don't think really people think about too often. Everyone's concerned about the deal, money, completion. I don't know that, tonight's a night to kind of stop and think about not just getting it done, but what's really best for the city, for us, and for the future. And we need to fulfill our responsibilities to the current generation of New Yorkers and generations to come. All of the other real estate programs that we benchmark ourselves against, and I know this is a crowd who knows how to benchmark against others, pretty competitive crowd out there, we recognize one common theme. They all have research facilities of some way, shape, or form. And it was our conclusion that Columbia's real estate program, having the best and brightest students and faculty, and being located in what we all humbly refer to as the center and real estate capital of the world, that we should have a research facility that not just matches what other universities have, but rather one that will be utilized by governments and industry alike to identify best practices for future growth. Columbia should be leading that exercise, not following, and I think in a very short period of time, that's what Vishan and Mark have achieved. When Vishan first called us together on his industry advisory board back in 2010, we all agreed that the industry lacks real empirical research to support our work. Research that is high quality and unquestionably independent. I think the independence is probably the exclamation point in this city where everybody has an opinion. He is delivering on that mandate, and we can all look forward to a lot of valuable work in the future. The Center for Urban Real Estate is a think tank devoted to asking the big questions and advocating for better solutions. It sees real estate development as a positive, transformative force, not a negative one. And it believes that our industry is at the center of the world's most pressing concerns. We have the opportunity and the responsibility to be bold. And that is why we are here tonight, to keep the progress moving forward. As someone overseeing New York City's largest commercial office portfolio, as well as being a proud alumnus of this program, it's only natural that I would be supportive of CURE, but I would be supportive regardless. And I'm pleased that so many of you feel the same way by your attendance here tonight. I would like to especially recognize Deputy Mayor Steele, Mary Ann Ty, the chair of the Real Estate Board, for their encouragement and support. I'm so pleased that they have joined with the rest of us to fully engage with CURE. We're truly all now working together. I would now like to introduce Robert Steele, New York City's Deputy Mayor for Economic Development. I have gotten to know Bob during his tenure as Deputy Mayor, and I can attest firsthand to his active leadership in forging ahead with the city's numerous development, housing, infrastructure, and transportation initiatives. He's responsible for the Bloomberg administration's 5-borough economic development strategy and job creation efforts, as well as its efforts to expand job training, strengthen small business assistance, promote new industries, diversify the economies. You must have a cape, Bob. This is quite a lot. Well, I think we all recognize and appreciate the crucial role that Bob and his staff play in the future of New York City, and we are very, very pleased to have him here with us this evening. I'd like to present Bob Steele.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's really a pleasure to be here on behalf of the administration and really to do a couple of things. First of all, to congratulate the Center on all the great work that they're doing, and to tell you that this is really an important asset for those of us that work in the city. I think that that you see the skills and the knowledge that's being transferred here at the Center, and it's really exciting and an incredible asset for the city. Let me thank and congratulate the Professor and Cure Director Vishaan Chakrabarti, who we all know is really the lamplighter for so many of the projects and the students that are accomplishing so much. This is really a big asset. We like to think that our boss, Mayor Bloomberg, is a big thinker and that he does his best to inspire all of us who work for him at City Hall on behalf of all of you. But the reality we all know is that the private sector, as well as the leadership they get from academia, such as here at the Center, really are the leading edge of innovation and cutting-edge thinking, and that's what CURE is all about. So the city is really excited to see the ideas and the commitment, as Mark said, to really disciplined research as to the issues and the opportunities and the public policy levers that we should be considering. We're pleased to be partnering with the Center on several projects, including some of the thinking about Mayor Bloomberg's signature initiative to have the Applied Sciences campus of Cornell and the Technion on Roosevelt Island. From the beginning, this has been an idea that we've appreciated and benefited from having the judgment of Vishaan and his other colleagues in helping us think about how to frame this opportunity. And it's just an example of the types of things that we really benefit from. Now, occasionally, some of the ideas that come from the Center, we haven't quite gotten our mind around. And so when we saw in the paper the picture of losing part of our harbor, it was a bit of a head-scratcher. And so I don't think that one, we're not going to get that done in the next 670 days, not that we're counting, and that one will have to leave for the next administration, Vishaan, for you to push along on that one. But despite that hesitation with regard to that particular project, I think the idea of being challenged and having big ideas are really the right thing. And the mayor encourages us to think about big ideas on behalf of all the citizens. We've done our best with the leadership of really people that came before me who really helped to set the stage, and those colleagues that I get to work with today. People like Dan Doctoroff, commissioners and presidents such as Seth Pinsky, Amanda Burden, Jeanette Sadekhan, are really fantastic people on behalf of your city. I think that for me, the real aha moment when I went to work for all of you at City Hall was just how strong a team the mayor has been able to organize. And I can say this since I recruited none of them. And there are people, though, that are there on behalf of all of you who were really best in class. And having worked in other places, I've never had a more strong group of colleagues than the commissioners and leaders that are working on behalf of all of you. And we have a lot of good things going on that we're proud of. And as I said jokingly, we do have 670 days left, and we pledge to you to sprint to the finish line every single minute of those 670 days. We have lots of things we want to accomplish, and some things we'll get to finish, and other things like the applied sciences, our goal is to put them on a track where we know where they are headed and that we've been able to guide them forward, and someone else will then have the responsibility of carrying it on, but we want to do our best to put them on a trajectory that we believe will be sustainable. And that really leads me, speaking of getting things done, to the real privilege that I have tonight, which is to introduce the keynote speaker. And many of you know Marianne Tai, so I'll do my best to make this succinct, but also hit the highlights because her accomplishments deserve the recognition. You know, Marianne is someone who has been a real leader for our city and in her industry. She is the CEO of the tri-state region of CBRE, and she's the chairwoman of REBNY and the first woman to hold that distinction. I always feel like I have to add this. I have 3 daughters, and we lived in London, and so I'm a bit jaded with regard to this issue. One of my daughters is about 5, and we've been living there, and Margaret Thatcher had been the prime minister, and she inquired of me whether a man could be prime minister. And so I have a different lens on this idea of the first woman. So for me, having worked in City Hall, I've always known there to be a woman who's leading REBNY, so I just assume that's the natural state of affairs. So, Marianne, I think you agree with that perspective. I think, too, though, that in addition, when you roll down the accolades, others, not just her peers, but people who audit these types of leadership positions have recognized Marianne in her special skills. She's one of Crane's, she is the #1 ranking on Crane's list of most powerful women in all of our city. So let me just say, too, that it's on a personal basis, it's really been fantastic for me to work with her in my job at City Hall. You know, we agree a very, very high percentage of the time, but when we don't, she's persistent and committed to helping me understand. And as my wife likes to say, there's no reason why we both need to be wrong. You should agree with me. And so I think the idea of having Marianne explain this to me and make things clear has been a great benefit. But on a serious note, she and her REBNY colleagues are fantastic to work with. There are issues where there needs to be an appropriate engagement and an advocacy on behalf of the industry and their vision of what our city is. So she does that expertly and always with great effect and success. So let me introduce to you the recognition and honoree of tonight, Marianne Tai. Marianne?
Thank you, Bob, very much for that. I have to say, it has been such a pleasure working with you and your wonderful staff. I saw Johanna here tonight. You brought such energy and openness and leadership and really revitalized the administration, at least from my industry's point of view, our industry's point of view in the 3rd term. So thank you for this, and thank you for being here. I feel almost as though I should issue a disclaimer before I begin tonight. You're going to hear now my point of view. Most of this is not REBNY's point of view, although I did have them read it and make sure that I wasn't doing something that was going to end up being damaging to our industry. But you're hearing my thoughts on this occasion. So, in January 2000, The Observer ran a headline that I think of often. It read, "Why New York Will Flourish in the 21st Century?" ? The answer was in the subhead, "Lots of smart people bumping into one another in a tight space." Those words capture so much. New York's openness to people and ideas, which goes all the way back to the Dutch. Our city's embrace of excellence in every conceivable form. Its ability to populate and support an extraordinary number and range of communities of interest. Yes, it is New York's people that give us an edge in global competition. I acknowledge that right at the top of my remarks, so I'm not going to bring it up again. Because tonight, I'm focused on the final 2 words of the subhead, tight space. My topic is New York's built environment, the dense, mixed-use, mixed-income, transit-based cityscape that is New York City today. And I take this theme because we're gathered to celebrate Columbia's new Center for Urban Real Estate, henceforth CURE. CURE's mission, as we've just heard, is to create a forum for a many-layered examination of global urbanization, to generate discussion and ideas from theoreticians and practitioners, or, to put it more directly, which is always my style, to stimulate those who are building cities to think through the intended and unintended consequences of their endeavors. Yes, CURE is a think tank, but the heads doing the thinking are wearing, even if only metaphorically, hard hats. So, to my mind, what better way to kick off the CURE conversation than discussing the city in which it's based? Exhibit 1, NYC. We engage this discussion at a pivotal moment in New York's evolution, because right now the city seems to be asking itself, are we up for competition on a global scale? Even asking the question seems a betrayal of our city's guiding ethos. New York has always been the city of aspiration, the city that accepts all comers and demands energy and ambition from its people. So why then do I even question New York's willingness to engage the global playing field? Let's start with landmarking historic districts. In 2002, the first year of the Bloomberg administration, there were 69 historic districts. Today, 10 years later, there are 104. The original purpose of landmarking historic districts was to preserve those areas of our city that were architecturally or historically significant and that represented the best of a bygone era. Somewhere along the way, and with increasing frequency in recent years, historic district designation has become a tool for neighborhood planning, and the quality and significance of landmark designation has been diminished. In the recent extension of the Soho cast-iron historic district, one analysis showed that 50% of the properties included vacant sites, gas stations, no-style buildings, and even buildings that had little or no historic fabric. That so many properties lack the architectural and historic significance required by the landmarks law points to our diminishing standards and the refashioning of landmarks as a tool to regulate the redevelopment of neighborhoods. Is there any way that we can be the most vibrant city in the world if we wrap so many of our neighborhoods in plastic? Part of New York's essence is its opposition to standing still, its commitment to change. But more and more, that vitality of intellect, that passion for the next new thing, is missing from our built environment. Now, anyone who knows me has heard me talk for a number of years about our aging office stock. We're the largest office market in the world, 389 million square feet in Manhattan alone. Today, the average age of a Manhattan office building is 72 years. Shanghai's office stock average age, 10 years. Hong Kong, 20. Singapore, 23. Even London is 60. And our city's pace of building has slowed in recent years. In each of the decades of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, New York added an average, each decade, of 58 million square feet to the inventory. In the 1990s, a total of 9 million square feet were added, and in the first decade of this century, just 22 million square feet was completed. Here, Mayor Bloomberg and his administration, with special credit to the fine work of the City Planning Commission under Amanda Burden, deserve high praise. The rezoning of the Hudson Yards and the extension of the number 7 line give us hope that with visionary leadership, our city is still capable of bold moves. There are so many lessons from the Hudson Yards journey, starting with New York needs big ideas. Hudson Yards began with the Olympic quest and with Dan Doctoroff and Jay Kriegel selling the dream of various sectors of the city being transformed to serve the Olympics and to serve our city's future as well. Once they gathered momentum, the Olympics became secondary to the larger reinvention. Big ideas, once past the tipping point, create their own energy. Second lesson from Hudson Yards: New York can't wait for Washington. Where do you think the number 7 extension would be if it were dependent on federal funding. Back in the day, Senator Daniel Moynihan issued an annual accounting informing Congress of how much more money New York sent to Washington each and every year than it received back in federal dollars. In those days, our congressional delegation was made up of advocates for New York. They made the case for New York as a source of funds and intellectual capital that benefits the entire nation. In 2010, I joined a delegation to Washington led by City Council Speaker Christine Quinn, another champion of Hudson Yards. We were seeking federal monies to restore the 41st and 10th Street station, one of two stations that were part of the No. 7 extension. The project was over budget, and the station had been eliminated from the plan. Meanwhile, New York had received less than 5% of the stimulus dollars earmarked for mass transit, despite the fact that New York is home to fully 1/3 of all the mass transit in the United States. The delegation, ourselves, we were hoping that other federal dollars could be found to complete the Bloomberg administration's $2.1 billion investment in our subway, marking the first significant service extension in nearly a quarter of a century and the broadest system expansion since the building of the IND in the 1930s. An off-the-record comment by a well-meaning Department of Transportation official told me all we needed to know. He said, "New York has priced itself out of the market," meaning that the new station's cost, which I have to admit was variously described to me as $500, $600, and $800 million, was too big a number to warrant DOT committing capital, if, as and when, DOT got capital from the Congress that could be allocated to mass transit. I hope that among CURE's inquiries will be an effort to deconstruct the puzzle of why construction in New York is too damn high. Some of this is just scale. I'm always frustrated when people talk about the size of overruns at the World Trade Center, for example. Why don't they begin by acknowledging that any number multiplied by 3 million square feet, which is the size of one World Trade Center, any number multiplied by 3 million is a big number. But beyond the scale of New York's projects, there's also the Gordian knot of issues that make up a construction pro forma. How long do you have to carry the site as you weave through the thicket of approvals, as the financing, materials, and leasing markets keep changing, especially now that the old 7-year cycle seems to have become compressed into 3 or 4 years? And do we build Union? And believe me today, that the question mark about Union is part of every construction conversation. If we build Union, can we make the numbers work? Efforts to parse this puzzle of New York's seemingly intractable construction costs are already taking place on a number of fronts. And kudos again to city planning, for example, for its business process reform program, which is known as Blueprint, much better, which speeds the pre-ULURP process. But New York would benefit from a neutral ground where all parties, developer, labor, government, capital, could lay out their concerns and collectively seek solutions. It's been my experience that New Yorkers love their city, and if they believe something is in New York's best interest, they will jump on board. CURE can provide the table around which the parties gather, a setting with only one bias, the bias that whatever emerges must be good for New York in the 21st century. And make no mistake about the urgency of this discussion. In 2001, Senator Schumer's Group of 35 report found that the city needed 60 million square feet of new office space by 2020 to keep pace with then expected job growth. Yes, those jobs have not materialized on the timetable that was expected, but that's fine, because the most that we can hope for from office stock, the most, given what's on the drawing boards now, is a total of 41 million square feet. And that includes the 22 million I already said were built since the year 2000, the entire build-out of the World Trade Center, the entire build-out of Hudson Yards, and a few other efforts that are on the drawing board. 41 million square feet in 20 years, less than was built in the 1960s. And this doesn't take into account the older office stock that is being subtracted from the inventory by conversion to residential. For every 111th or 205th Avenue that has been repurposed by a Google or Gray Advertising, There are numerous pre-World War II office properties that now provide much-needed housing. How, then, to revitalize our skyline? CURE will no doubt grapple with this question in depth, but I'm going to suggest two changes to public policy that would benefit the city near and long term. New York's prime office market is Midtown East. It isn't an exaggeration to claim that two of the most valuable skyscrapers in the world are the GM and the Seagram's buildings. But the average age of a Midtown East office building is 68 years old this year, and every site in Midtown East is covered, due in no small part to the proximity of our city's great transportation hub, Grand Central. No one is willing to tear down one of these properties and build a new one. Why? One reason is because the 1961 zoning resolution essentially downzoned Midtown East, making many of the pre-61 structures overbuilt under current zoning. Sure, you can keep the existing FAR if you save 25% of the structural steel, but you'd end up with a compromised design with slab heights and column spacing sacrificed so as not to lose valuable square footage. And even many of the post-1961 Midtown East towers are tired. Today, the lowest rents in our CBD are on 3rd Avenue, from 42nd to 59th. The properties just don't match up with the 21st century tenant values. Yet who could afford to tear them down, to cut off cash flow for at least 4 years only to rebuild a 21st century version of exactly the same square footage? Yes, rents would be exponentially higher and lease-up time likely swift. But the cost of that 4-year carry and the spike in real estate taxes that a new skyscraper must pay means numbers on the teardown won't compute. Deputy Mayor Steele and his team, including the City Planning Commission, are already addressing the problems that the Real Estate Board have identified in the Midtown East office market. Changes in zoning won't produce results immediately. However, we need to start now on this. Billions of dollars are at stake here. Investors and lenders are going to proceed with caution, but over time, Midtown would be re-energized by its 21st century additions, visible testimony that New York City isn't resting on its 20th century primacy. My second proposal aims to make new office construction everywhere in the city more viable. Currently, unless a skyscraper is built in an area with a special tax program, like the World Trade Center or Hudson Yards, it is impossible to know what the taxes will be upon the tower's completion. That means that investors and lenders can't project returns with any reasonable certainty, and developers and tenants are forever arguing over who's going to take the risk on real estate taxes. Is it any surprise that only 19% of the office square footage built since 1990 included properties with market rate real estate taxes? And it's no surprise that most of those buildings that had market rate taxes were boutique buildings, basically hedge fund hives. The market is, in essence, telling the Department of Finance that taxes north of 25 to 30% of rent are too big a gamble when added to all the other hurdles of new development. Why not create a special tax program for new office construction? Perhaps because the city fears the loss of revenue. In the last 10 years, the city has become increasingly dependent on real estate taxes, which are the most stable and predictable source of tax revenue. Over that period, the city budget has grown 60%, and real estate taxes have grown more than 100%. Today, real estate taxes are just shy of 50% of all the tax revenues collected in the city. But counterintuitively, it is precisely by giving tax incentives and stimulating new development that we can grow New York's tax base. And I saw Charlie Bagley here, and Charles, we will discuss this over lunch, I guarantee you. I often use the new New York Times building as an example of what's possible. Because before the Renzo Piano Design building went up, there were 10 buildings on the site, paying in total $1.2 million a year in taxes. 3 years later, the skyscraper complete, the taxes on the site were $13 million. The Times and Forest City would never have built that tower without a tax package, which, by the way, is basically a 29-year predictable program of taxes representing what I would guess would be 50% of market rate taxes today. Now, did the city lose money by giving that incentive? On the contrary. The list of New York City topics for CURE's consideration are, I fear, inexhaustible. We haven't even touched on housing, and truly that is a mistake because it is too urgent a need. The city has 3.3 million units of housing. 1.4 are rent-controlled or stabilized, 1 million are owned, and 765,000 are market-rate rentals. The rent-controlled and stabilized units operate under a structure that is hard to justify on social or economic terms, but it is an untouchable topic among politicians. Basically, we've created subsidized housing, not for the poor, not for the middle class, but for the lucky. As for affordable housing, the New York City development community keeps adding to the supply via the 80-20 program. But when the affordability clock runs out on the 20%, those apartments go to market rate. And they have to, since the real estate taxes represent 35% of gross rent collected. Without permanently affordable housing and less onerous taxes on these rentals to preserve their affordability, the city is caught in a losing cycle. And there's more, much more. Mass transit. With few exceptions, the newest part of the MTA system is 80 years old. The MTA is using technology from the 1930s to move 8.5 million riders every day, 24/7. That system is the lifeblood of our region. Can we wait for the federal government to supply the funds to bring it into the 21st century? CURE can lead the discussion. Where do we find the money to create a sustainable financial and operational model for our mass transit system? And finally, a pet topic of mine I can't resist. The failure, the multi-generational failure, to confront the reality of vehicles in our city. To function as a global city, people and things need to move around, and mass transit can't cover package delivery. Congestion pricing may be part of the solution, but it is only a piece of the answer if it works at all. Bike lanes are, to my point of view, not part of the solution. In the meantime, every day, delivery trucks, UPS, FedEx, receive an average of 7,000 parking tickets every day. And over the course of the year, pay $100 million in fines, which they charge back to whoever is getting the package. And while the delivery trucks are double parked, black cars are circling the block waiting for their pickup. I'd like CURE to investigate. How do we solve the package delivery and the black car problems? And if we solve them, how much will congestion decline? Our city was built on big ideas. The grid, Central Park, the IRT, the World Trade Center, Battery Park City, soon to come, Hudson Yards. New York will not retain its global leadership status by shrink-wrapping our neighborhoods, keeping barriers to development high, neglecting the very public works that are our lifeblood. So CURE, your timing is perfect. On behalf of the Real Estate Board of New York, I'd like to propose a toast. Please, everybody pick up their glass. Here's to the Center for Urban Real Estate. May CURE live long, and may our beloved New York City prosper. Thank you.
Wow. If there was any question amongst anybody here in the crowd as to why Mary Ann Tai is the leading light of our industry and the leader of the Real Estate Board in New York, I think that mystery was dispelled this evening. Thank you for that terrific, terrific speech, Mary Ann. And really quite well done, and I think CURE's got their work cut out for them for about the next 7 years, so probably don't need another industry board meeting until sometime around 2020. But in the meantime, Vishan is going to have a terrific response to the challenges that Mary Ann just threw the gauntlet down on. after dinner. So anyway, thank you all again for attending. Enjoy dinner. And Vishaan, we look forward to your answers to those questions.